Yes, my Straight Talk family. When you hear that theme song, you know it's time for another edition of Straight Talk, and time for me to bid you, my Straight Talk family in St. Kitts and Nevis, in particular, a very pleasant night, and to all my Straight Talk family throughout the entire Eastern Caribbean, north down to Jamaica, and south as way south as Trinidad and Tobago and Guyana. And as well, I greet my Straight Talk family in the Kittian and Nevision diaspora who are all over the world and are joining us via the World Wide Web. There's some of you I know in Africa, there's some of you in Asia, there are some of you in Europe, and there are a whole lot of you all over North America. So I am at liberty to say good night. I can say good morning, and I will say good afternoon, because one of such greetings is applicable to the region in which you now find yourselves. Sadly but truly, we are still under our COVID-19 protocols, even though the vaccines have been stepping up. But my Straight Talk families, this is a program, if you're joining me for the first time, that facilitates, a forum that facilitates all issues of national interest, be they legal, be they environmental, be they technological, social, economic, and or political issues. On Straight Talk, we do have a forum to express yourselves freely. Let us in the process continue to keep St. Kitts and Nevis as one of the freest countries in the entire world. On this program, we try to raise the level of national consciousness. We try to raise the level of national discourse by alerting our people to their rights, to their responsibilities, and certainly to their obligations. My name is Ian Patches Liburd, and I give Almighty God thanks for blessing me with yet another opportunity to join you in on yet another occasion. And my Straight Talk family, if you are joining me again for the first time, I want to inform you, Straight Talk is a participative program. By that I mean we include your calls, we include your emails, and if you're so minded to participate, the numbers are 465-2555 or 718-577-2916. For those of you who I normally say, like the cloak of anonymity, you want to hide behind the keyboard or your mouse, we give you access via our email platform, and that address is zistraightttalk, zizstraightalk at gmail.com. And tonight, my Straight Talk family, I do have a guest in studio tonight, and he is no stranger to Straight Talk. I believe we have entertained him here several times before, so I consider him not a stranger, but as we say, one of us, my Straight Talk family. And he is none other than E. Anthony Ross, who is a professional engineer by training. He's also a lawyer by training, a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators as well. As a matter of fact, he's a former judge, and he is a Queen's Counsel as well. He's here tonight in all those capacities. And tonight we are going to discuss the issue of land use, or I am a little bit weird to say land use management, but in fact, land management is the process of managing the use and development in both urban and rural settings of land resources. And land resources are used for a variety of purposes. And my Straight Talk family, for those students of economics, as well, we always learn that there are certain factors of production. The term used by economics to denote economic resources, the term used by economists, I should say, to denote the economic resources, both human and other resources, which, if properly utilized, will bring about a flow or output of goods and services. And it is said that there are three factors of production: land, labor, and capital. Tonight we are looking at that factor called land, and we're going to look at the land management here in St. Kitts now and in the future. And another to take us through these moments, these 2 hours, we have with us again E. Anthony Ross. Should I say Esbon Anthony Ross, QC, professional engineer, and FCI, which is the FCI AB, which is the Fellow of the Chartered Institute of Transport. Mr. Ross, good night to Straight, welcome to Straight Talk once again.
Good night to you. Good night to you.
Yes, Mr. Ross, are you hearing me?
Yes, I am hearing you perhaps a little too loudly. Perhaps I'm getting some feedback. Anyway, thanks for having me here, Ambassador, and we're ready to roll. No, I'm not hearing you. They
just say hello, say good night.
Hello? No.
Mr. Ross?
Yes, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Okay, well,
Ambassador, can you hear me? It was set up okay before, but they've made some changes. Can you hear me, Ambassador?
And Mr. Ross, we'll get this sorted out, get the sound sorted out. We are here, as I said, simply put, my Straight Talk family, the factors of production are the inputs necessary to obtain an output. However, all the inputs that must be applied are to be regarded as factors in the economic sense. And some of these inputs in normal situations are free. Although we can look at the atmospheric.
Can you hear me now, Ambassador? Ambassador, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Standpoint of the whole economy, a cost is involved in using this resource. If it's the result of this particular use, the production of something else, which depends upon the same kind of resource, it is hampered. Thus, if the input is scarce, as Straight Talk family, in relation to the need for it, it's regarded as a factor of production. And as we wait on Mr. Ross and get his connectivity right, the needed inputs, therefore, may be scarce, and so constitute productive factors, either because they represent something which cannot be produced, like land, in the strict economic sense, or because, although their supply could be enlarged, like factories, to do so would be costly in terms of resources. So, the productive factors, as I mentioned earlier, are commonly classified in the groups land, labor, and capital. And land represents resources whose supply is low in relation to demand and cannot be increased as the result of production. And the income derived from the ownership of this factor called land is known as economic rent. Now, in terms of labor, though, which we are not really addressing tonight, and I'll address the issue of labor in St. Kitts Nevis in due course. But the labor represents all those productive resources that can be applied only at the cost of a human effort. For instance, the wage or salary is a form of payment for the use of this factor. And this effort, the economists regard as qualifying maybe either manual or mental, although my straight dog family, the wage or salary is some of payment is from this factor, and I still have Mr. Ross online. If you're hearing me, say whether you hear me or not. Just give a signal. Let's hear if you are hearing me, and let's get this part of the program going. My straight dog family, and I am wondering again, and I want to say, if you're just joining me, you are here in Straight Talk for yet another edition. Believe it or not, it is the 130th edition of Straight Talk on this radio station, ZIZ. And tonight we do have with us in studio again. We do have with us E. Anthony Ross. And Mr. Ross, if you are there, say good night.
Good night. Can you hear me now, Ambassador? Ambassador, are you hearing me now?
Okay, we still seem to be having some difficulty with Mr. Ross, and we will see how we can sort that technical difficulty out. We're not hearing Mr. Ross, so we will see how we can get that technical difficulty sorted out. And perhaps let's take a little break here, and we'll come back. We'll come back with Mr. Ross. If for a moment we're still not hearing you, Mr. Ross. Mr. Ross, if you hear me, I say something. People want to hear you.
It appears as though you're muted on your end.
Mr. Ross.
It appears as though you're muted on your end. Can you hear me, Ambassador? Can you hear me, Ambassador?
Friends, supporters, brothers, sisters, family, citizens of St. Kitts Nevis. It's the annual People's Labour Party PLP Convention 2021. The PLP Convention 2021 will be held this Saturday, March 27 at 4 p.m. on the Utley's playing field under the theme Together, Empowering and Uniting People, Rebuilding Our Economy. The People's Labour Party is the most dynamic, vibrant, and fastest growing political party in the Caribbean. Come, join our dynamic, charismatic leader, Prime Minister Dr. Honorable Timothy Harris, and Deputy Leader, the vibrant and innovative Honorable Akila Byron Nisbet, this Saturday, March 27th at 4 p.m. at the Utley's Playfield for our annual convention. Come in your orange and bring your whistles, bring your bells. Come one, come all with your mask and practice social distancing. The People's Labour Party.
Let me tell you something.
Come join us.
Every Monday and Thursday night from 8 until 10 p.m. on ZIZ Radio Power 96.1, tune in for Straight Talk.
Your job is to serve the people, not to get in the back and forth that sometimes as humans, people can say things about you and you believe there's a limit. But the one who wears the armor and carries the name of God, let him fight your battle.
It's a program where you can share your views.
Well, I don't usually call into the radio station, but I had to call in. I was in the Federation over the weekend and I was quite impressed. Flew in over Port Dante and I see the development happening there. I drive up in the east in your area for years and years and years. That area has been neglected. Those houses there on the other side of Mr. Byron gas station was. See y'all getting ready to do something about it.
Ask your questions.
What Douglas want to do? Be a Satan and judging sin?
And speak your mind.
Good evening to you, Patches, and good evening to your listeners home and abroad. One good term deserves another. And like I said, one good term deserves another.
Tune in every Monday and Thursday night from 8 until 10 p.m. right here on Zolize Radio with your host, Ian Patches Liburd, for Straight Talk.
Reach the top somehow. I'll keep moving on. I won't stop now. I'll keep moving on.
Okay, my Straight Talk family, we do apologize for what seemed to have been a technical glitch, and we are now with husband Anthony Ross, QC, if you're in the venture of just join us. Mr. Ross is an engineer by training, also a lawyer, and a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators, a former judge himself. He is not just a lawyer, he is in fact a Queen's Counsel, my Straight Talk family. And Mr. Ross, if you're hearing me, let the world hear you. Say good night.
Good night, Ambassador. Can you hear me now? Good night, Ambassador.
Yes, I'm hearing you. I wonder if you were...
Don't wonder. It was not me, it was the
Straight Talk
technicals.
family.
Can you hear me now, Ambassador?
Good to have you here. Yes, I'm hearing you loud and clear. I'm hearing you loud and clear.
Oh, we're now connected.
As I was saying, as I said before, we are going to discuss the issue of land management. I know we spoke about the land use management, but I want to posit the view that land management in itself is the process of managing the use and development of land resources in both urban and rural settings. And land resources are used for a variety of purposes. And perhaps you can, in your introduction, tell us what are some of these purposes.
Well, as you look around, you can see housing, you can see roadways, you can see agricultural activity, you got the hotel industry, you got places where you're going to be landing your fishery products. There's this whole variety of uses, but there are two things that have got to be considered. One of them is the private interest of landowners, and on the other hand is the public interest that people are part of communities, and communities are built on lands. And the way that our governmental system works, there is some level of oversight, and that's where the planning process kicks in. Many places have got real rigorous, what is called planning acts, and this is legislation which provides a level of regulation with respect to the use of land, although it could be private lands. And the long-term purpose depends on what the people want. Now, what we have been seeing a lot of in the Caribbean is following what has happened before, rather than recognizing that what has happened before has resulted in a lot of bad planning. And, you know, we've got to recognize that it's never too late to start doing the right thing. We cannot just worry about condemning all that has happened. We've got to collectively come together and determine how can we move our society forward through some planned processes. And I can continue.
Mr. Ross.
Yes?
Before you continue, though, you mentioned private versus public interest, and you also mentioned the Caribbean and the bad planning. But I want us to focus. Yes, we are part of the Caribbean. To focus on St. Kitts and Nevis, perhaps we can start, before you elaborate any further, if you tell us what is the situation, the land situation. Let's look at what I call the situation factor in St. Kitts and Nevis, and tell us what is the situation as it relates to land, its current disposition, and so on.
I have had a look primarily at St. Kitts. And why is because St. Kitts has its own development control regime. It has one, and Nevis has its own. For instance, if you start with St. Kitts has got 68, it has an area of 68 square miles. But if you look at it from a point of view of development, regardless to how you classify development, approximately 30% of it is not currently accessible. And I say not currently accessible because with good engineering and sometime in the future, I've got no doubt that areas that are not now accessible, particularly for development, subdivision development, they'll find ways to deal with it. But that 30% of your 68 square miles translates to about 13, has translated to about 20.4 square miles. That's the inaccessible portion, which means that the accessible portion is, and then with the accessible portion, it's broken down into some lands that was part of the land for debt swap, and that's about 9.7 square miles. Then you've got the Southeast Peninsula, which is an area that we've got to pay some attention to. It is about 6.3 square miles, and then what is left is about 31.7 square miles for housing, agriculture, light industry, hotels, parks, recreation, and whatever else we want to do with it. Now, if you take if you take those amounts and the inaccessible portion, I say, is about 30%, the land swap approximately 14%, the Southeast Peninsula 9.2%, and the rest for housing, agriculture, and so on, that comes up to around 46%. But that is percentages as against the 68 square miles that we have. Now, if we back off and say, let's look at the accessible portion. The accessible portion is about 47.6, maybe 48 square miles. But then the land swap absorbs 20% of the accessible land. The Southeast Peninsula, 13% of the accessible land. And agriculture, housing, light industry, parks, etc. will pick up a remaining 6 to 7%. Now,
sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Ross. Yeah. Sorry to interrupt you. But could you put that in the context of acreage. I know you mentioned square miles and so on, but for the listener, right, in terms of equivalent acreage, how many acres of land are available, for example, overall in the 68 square miles and the inaccessible and accessible portion of that? Can you do that?
Yes, it's just a multiplication. You know that 640 acres are in a square mile. So, as far as your 68 square miles is concerned, that translates to 43,520 acres. Okay? And then when you take 13% of that, that is inaccessible right now. That amounts to 13,056 acres, which means then that what is left is 30,464 acres. As far as the land swap is concerned, that was around 6,200 acres. And then as far as the Southeast Peninsula is concerned, that's around 4,000 acres. And the rest of the land is around 20,264, 20,760 acres. And many people would look at that and say it's a lot of land, but really it isn't. If you look at a place like Hong Kong Island, as opposed to what's happening on St. Kitts, you can then go and look at the population density to find out how many people are there per acre. But I don't want that to be the focus of what we're talking about here. What I am looking at as far as these numbers that I've given you is something that I see as a problem. And the problem is that there's a section of this island where 13% of it can be hived off just about, and this causes me to think of a very interesting article that was presented at the 46 meetings of I think it was the heads of government in Dominica in 2008. And one of the things that the author, who was Dr. Len Ishmael, wrote, she was speaking about the economics and what happens as a result of too much focus on just tourism. And at a part of it, she wrote, and even while some of this money will trickle through our economies, and yes, some jobs will be created, even more jobs are being created for those outside, and several negative effects are fast emerging. The first, she says, was that land prices have no realistic basis anymore, and the average OECS woman and man is finding it increasingly impossible to break into the class of landowners within their own countries, making home ownership an indisputable social objective for all member states, increasingly out of their reach, even on the islands, even as the islands continue on their development trajectory. So that's one, and that goes back to land use and land management. The second is that land that is being sold, and this is a very important thing. The second is that land is being sold on the foreign market, and when it leaves local ownership once, it is never traded on the local market again. For instance, when it's gone, it's gone. And that's just the second one. The third one she spoke about, huge acreages of scenic landscape are being alienated from the quiet use and enjoyment by locals as increasingly...
Harbor is 2,500 acres of land.
And I will deal with that. And enjoy by local and increasingly large chunks of countryside are being developed, fenced, and gated. Fourth is the fact that several resorts are acting in ways to intimidate locals from using beaches on which their resorts have frontage. So these are some of the things that we are seeing. And these are some of the things that I recognize as problems. Now, I don't want to be appearing to pick on anything over at the Southeast Peninsula. And while I was talking to you, I heard a voice come in about something being 2,500 acres of land. Let it be 2,500 acres. I'm not going to argue about the thing is that the facts are easy to establish.
That was sorry to interrupt you. Sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Ross. That was a mistake on my part, right? So I didn't give you a signal to get into that. I'm sorry to really interrupt you and your train of thought. While on that, though, right? I want to also, since you're going into that, I read an interesting article by one Christine Toppin Alahar, who I think is an attorney at law and planning, whose specialties are environmental law, land law, and policy, and town and country planning. And in the abstract from the article under the caption, "The Beach Belong to We, Socio-Economic Disparity and Islanders' Right of Access to the Coast in a Tourism Paradise." And the abstract reads, and I quote, "The Caribbean islands share a history of plantation economy in which the 1%, not only control the natural resources and economies of the region, but also own the majority of the 99% who are enslaved. This disparity in wealth approximated a racial divide in society, as a wealthy minority was predominantly white, while the dispossessed majority was mainly non-whites. While the coastlands were always of importance in these export-oriented agricultural colonies, beach and backshore lands unsuitable for agriculture were less so, often being utilized for boatyards, fishing depots, cemeteries, and tenantries or squatter settlements housing the landless." So how do you put St. Kitts and Nevis in this context?
Well, it falls in that context by facts, by its own history. But the other thing is, Ambassador, it was not peculiar to the Caribbean. In a lot of places in North America, the coastline was never a place that was seen as overly valuable. You go now to Kingston, Ontario, and I remember when I was there for a short time during my university years, the waterfront was a terrible area. And they've gone down, they've cleaned it up, they've put up some boardwalks, and it is now a very much sought after area. You take a look at Halifax. Halifax had a community there which was called Africville, and by the name Africville, it has something to do with Africa. And it was on the shores of the Bedford Basin. And during my time, when I was in engineering school in Halifax, is when the city of Halifax decided they wanted to move the people out, and they came there with some big amount of cash in some suitcases, of course in all small bills. And they go to their community and they were able to buy out the people for just about next to nothing. And they then cleaned the entire areas. And this was one of the things, because I could recall when I was doing town planning, the professor was, I think he was from Czechoslovakia, Dr. Mazo. One of the things he pointed out, that as far as town and community planning is concerned, it is not to develop lots and to develop housing. It is for people. And what you're trying to do is to develop a sense of community. People get to know their neighbors. People are not really planning to move in there for short term now and move out shortly thereafter. So that planning with some level of imagination can promote sustainable communities. If you don't have that, then they become more kind of transient communities where people will move and live there for a while, always hoping to move out to a better place. And this, that kind of lack of foresight results in inner cities crumbling, and they suffer from what in this industry is referred to as obsolescence and blight. But that does not have to be the end. There's something called urban renewal. As a matter of fact, there were two people from the local planning unit that was speaking about urban revitalization. And this is something that can be looked at. And there are a lot of lessons that you can learn from places who went in there and going with the bulldozers, cleared the land, up goes some apartment buildings, and you scatter the people. Others where you recognize that the people are a community, and you go in and you work with them to determine how their land base can best be used and how you can assist. For instance, one of the things that I've thought about, and remember, I can't make policy, I just have my own views. But one of the things I looked at, I said, look, here it is that over the last 15, 17, perhaps 20 years, such an inflow of money through this citizenship by investment program. And how come none of it has filtered down to Newtown, Irishtown, the village where I'm from, Old Road, or any of these places? When it is that you're becoming upward socially mobile, the point is that you leave those areas, and what do? Where do you go? I do not want to identify where people are moving, but I'm saying that something better can be done with some better thinking and some better planning. And one of the things that I could recall, I can point out, Ambassador, is that article that you mentioned, I have had an opportunity to look at that sometime in the past also. And one of the things, at least you started with the executive summary, the abstract, and I go over to the conclusions. And here it was one writer who had migrated to the UK. He wrote, "Every poor country accepts tourism as an unavoidable degradation. None has gone so far as the West Indian Islands, which, in the name of tourism, are selling themselves into a new slavery." And these are some of the things that we could look at. And it is not enough to just condemn them. It is to come and say, look, what is the solution?
But Mr. Ross.
Yes, sir.
You can say patches from now on, right? You mentioned the SIDF money didn't go into Newtown or Irishtown, where you're from, and the village and so on, right? But we know, I should say, where that money went to. And are you saying that this was not a wise investment? Here's where some of that money went to.
The investors and developers in the Christopher Harbour again had events, but we wanted development, and the Christopher Harbour people approached the SIDF. The cabinet, with me as the chairman of the cabinet, took the decision to support the SIDF, to invest foreign money that was brought into the country for our advancement, and invested it in the Christopher Harbour so that experiment of development can continue.
So was that a good investment, a bad investment?
Well, guess it speaks for itself, okay? And I have had nothing to do with any lawyer-client work that I was doing. I will tell you something we know in North America. When you find a lot of these groups get together and they start falling out, one of the things they don't ever hesitate on is bad talking each other. So way back when, I got to understand that as far as the group who was doing this Christopher Harbour thing is concerned, that they had made commitments as a part of the underpinning for what they're doing over there, that their involvement would be injecting many billions, not millions, billions into the local economy. But if you look at the documents, they said within the next 20, I think it's 20 or 25 years. I don't recall the number. However, we are here now in 2021, and as I recall, that term for which they got a very, very substantial amount of concessions is going to end in a couple of years, and I got no doubt they're going to be coming back to see about getting more concessions. And the point is that they have not, the involvement has not yet injected $500 million. So what we've got is a situation where, as far as some of these agreements are concerned, I got no doubt that the agreements could be seen as having been breached. And one of the things that I think that has to happen, or one of the things that I would hope happen as far as that place is concerned, is that they'll be forced to renegotiate a substantial amount of these extreme benefits that they got. One of the things that they did get, which I find really in conflict with some of the local law, is that now they own a portion of the seabed. And they don't only own it, they're prepared to sell it off for people with fancy boats and so on. Well, that's on the one hand. But on the other hand, there is the legislation that was introduced back in 1987 with respect to the National Conservation and Environmental Protection Act. And there's just a little section I want to read to you, Patches. It said, no, they were speaking about access to shore frontage, and they were speaking about the Grenada situation, the situation of Grenada, and it could be St. Lucia, and some of those which had a French influence which sort of locked in something called, it used to be the King's Chain. And there was a ribbon around the entire landmass, which was intended to be always public property. Now, it went into a lot of gray areas, but as far as the writer, as far as from the writer, it says here, in all of the aforementioned islands, the existence of a coastal reserve is an accident of history, not the product of any contemporary initiative to provide public access to the coast. Now, this is interesting. The first country in the Commonwealth Caribbean to enact modern legislation establishing a legal right to public access to beaches in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. Here's where it started. The National Conservation Environmental Protection Act of 1987, NCEPA, declared that all rights in and over the beach are vested in the Crown, and the public has the right of access and the right to use and enjoy the beaches for recreational activities and purposes. It also provided...
We'll get back to that. We'll get back to that in terms of the access to the beach, right? But just for the benefit of our listeners, because you mentioned seabed and seabed rights, right? Just put that in layman's terms, because I think the seabed rights are owned by government that can only be leased. I don't know if they sell it. But put that in layman's terms, what are the seabed and seabed rights?
The seabed is all the land that remains under the water that is around in what is called your exclusive economic zone. For instance, as far as St. Kitts, every one of these islands, they've got this zone around them, which I think is around 12 miles offshore. And the land under there is classified as land that belongs to the state. Okay? That's your exclusive economic zone.
Okay. Fine. So when those developers on the peninsula we do things like this, tell us if it's correct or not.
You know, from the very first start when the project started over there, I don't recognize that over there will soon be blocked off and no one will be able to go over there. First, the first thing that started is when they blocked off that sandbank and said that you have to park your vehicle out by the road. You could walk down there. There is an area down there that vehicle could park. But you see, when we didn't have nobody representing us such like Douglas, anything gonna happen in St. Kitts. Even at the Volcano Mountain, you see where they put those houses up there? It makes it so hard now as taxi man to take a tour to the Volcano Mountain. It's longer and it's harder. They had a meeting down there with us. We were supposed to go back with the next meeting, and they didn't come back.
So this is what I think we refer to as the private versus the public interest. How do we deal with that?
Well, we deal with it the same way that just about all other democratic countries have dealt with it. You know, just let me just read one more sentence for what I was saying before. As far as this access is concerned, this act, the NCPA of St. Kitts and Nevis Act, it also provided for the establishment of public access to every beach in St. Kitts and Nevis over public and private land by means of compulsory acquisition of any coastal, compulsory acquisition if needed. So we have seen in other countries, and there's a lot of matters that have gone to court, which sort of upholds like the rights of access. And it is just that, I mean, you know, I would have hoped that there's some people would have been sufficiently courageous to take on some of those in this area. Okay, I am a little too old to be getting involved in that kind of fight now, but you know, that's it. Those are the battles that I fought for a very long time when I was up north. You know, right now, anybody has got a right to go to to the Development Control and Planning Board offices, and they are allowed to see any file with any approvals. And you look at these approvals, and if those approvals are contrary to anything that you classify as your own interest, you know, you can always resort to the court. One of the articles.
We normally invite our calls. The time has long passed for that. I know we had a tardy start because of the technical glitch we had, right?
Yeah.
But I know as we continue, we're going to look at the productivity of the land we have available. You mentioned the accessible versus the inaccessible land, and how is this affected by government policy? We want to look at that as well. And while we're on the Christopher Harbour as well, you know, governments have responsibilities as well to provide not just the Christopher Harbour but throughout the country public access, roads and other utilities. And I believe it was over some $25 million was spent on developing that particular area, a private area. Roads were put into that area, roads and at the ordinary man's expense, beg your pardon, and they are now being prevented from even access to the beaches you mentioned. But I want to go to the lines, but I want you to give you a minute or two to lay your base as we continue this discussion in terms of the accessible lands, the inaccessible lands, and how can we get those 13,000 acres, for example, accessible? Because at some stage they ought to be. And I don't know if in this era, if acquisition is a palatable word for lots of reasons. But before I open the lines, I'll give you a minute or so to complete laying your groundwork.
Good. One of the articles that I've been looking at is something, it is headed, Lawyering Up Local Communities, Courts, and Urban Renewal. And the abstract reads, what is the role of the judicial system in solving issues of urban renewal? That's the question. And in the paper, the writer said that they propose that communities use the courts as a redress to become part of the decision-making process on urban renewal issues, because courts provide procedural issues that are easily open to challenge, and they were speaking about in the United States, it was federal statutes. But what I'm saying here is that the first thing is to develop a proper land use plan. In some places, it is called a master plan. Other places, it is called an official plan. Now, this is a document which, for instance, if I was heading up a team right now, you start here now, this is 2021, and you say, ask yourself, what kind of country do we want to see in 40 years' time? So you've got a 40-year plan, which is a big document, and it's got certain areas for what kind of use, whether it is industrial, commercial, institutional, and you set out your views today of what you'd like to see in 40 years. But experience has told us that what we're looking at today is not necessarily what we're going to be looking at in 5 years' time. So what you do is you develop this master plan, which has a 30, 40-year trajectory. And you also develop an implementation plan, which might be 5 years. So during the first 5 years, you are following that master plan, and at the end of that 5 years, you ask yourself the question again. Now we see where we reach. Do we still want to go where we said we were going 5 years ago, or has it changed? And if it changed, you move to the change so that you're doing it in incremental fashion, but all times with a long-term plan.
Okay, here's where we'll invite our callers and as well our emailers. Remember, the numbers to call are 465-2555 or 718-577-2916. Our email address is zizstreettalk@gmail.com. I always like to implore you, before I do so, and I'll do so in a few minutes, before I go to the lines, to respect others. And of course, to achieve that, you must first respect yourselves. Let us try to be fair to all concerned. Let us try to build goodwill and better friendships. Let us ensure that the things we say and or do will be beneficial to all concerned. And in the process of saying and or doing such things, let us strive to build a kinder, gentler St. Kitts and Nevis. With that said, at 4 before 9 o'clock, I say good night, caller. You're live.
Good night, and how art thou?
I am peaceful. Yourself?
I'm all right. The first thing I turn on to you is to hear you talking about the COVID vaccine. And it chills me because I have an appointment tomorrow for my vaccine. So I'm going in the name of Jehovah and in Jesus Christ. So I hope everything runs well. And I'm looking at you on my TV in my front room, and I hear him saying your labor friend is saying you're married, but how then your American wife put the ring on your wrong finger? Because I'm looking at you and you have up your left finger and I haven't seen the ring on the right finger. So I want to know what's going on. Anyway, have a good night. And just keep me in your prayers for that COVID tomorrow. I'm going for my vaccine, so keep me in your prayers, okay? Thank you. Have a good night. Enjoy.
Have a good night as well. I will keep in your prayers and trust that you'll stay safe.
Sorry about that.
Let's go to the lines at 2 before 9 o'clock. Caller, you're live.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. Good evening, Dr. Ian Patrick Liburd, and good evening, my fellow villager, Mr. Osborne Ross.
Good evening to you, sir.
Yeah, I'm glad when you're on the program. I like that. I feel safe.
Thank you.
Yeah, now, I have one or two questions for you, Brother Ross. This kind of behavior that the guy spoke about on the soundbite, that happening over the Southeast Peninsula where locals cannot use this beach and that beach, and you know you got to park your vehicle so far and walk to the beach. Well, I have seen that coming many years ago, when whosoever was in authority of this country gave the owner for that house over southwest Frigate Beach on the Caribbean side to build that house in the water. You know, I have seen that coming. So when they started over Southeast Peninsula, that wasn't no surprise to me. Now my question is this: you say we can go to the what is that? The building zoning board or something, awful like that?
Development Control and Planning Board.
Right. So then, okay, if we go there, they should be able to tell us who gave and how that individual get to put his house there, and if that house was placed there wrongfully and lawfully, can any one of us take that matter to the court?
Okay, two things. Number one, if you go to the planning board, they don't have to answer a whole lot of your questions. My view, you can go there, and if you want to see an application and you want to see the approval, you can see that. That's the information you can get from them, because they don't want to be in a position as a peer to be advising you one way or another. You go there to just get information. It's almost like if you go to a place to buy a newspaper.
No, let me finish. I'll move unless somebody is coming.
No, let me finish what I'm saying to you. That's number one.
Go ahead.
But the other part, if it is that there is some kind of building and it is on land that it should not be built upon, yes, a local person can go to the court with an application, very likely for judicial review. You review it, and the court can very likely declare, make a declaratory order as to what could happen to that house. Now, let me point out to you that there was a decision of Justice Ventos within the last 2 years in Nevis, in which violations of their planning process was identified, and a house that was built had to be taken down. So it is a possible.
Okay. I'm satisfied. Okay, I'll continue to listen while others try to get in. Thanks for your response.
Thank you very much. We go straight back to the lines. Call you live.
Good night, Mr. Liburd. And good night, Mr. Ross.
Sylvine.
Good night.
Now, it's quite interesting, the discussion you are having, because the biggest offender is government, past, present, and to come. Now, some years ago, we had a land use plan. We had a UN consultant, a lady from Tanzania. She did the land use, went around and everything. And I think they have upgraded it more than once. But the government itself is the one that breaks the law. I mean, people, when you go on, people say, this is what we want here, and this is what the land use, what the land is best suited for. Out at the Southeast Peninsula, I don't know if you remember, there was a Southeast Peninsula board that was put in place after the road was built to say what kind of activities could go on both on the land and in the sea. And I recall when the government changed in 1995, the board was dissolved and the people were sent to work in the physical planning. And the then Prime Minister gave himself the authority to decide what goes on there, so that nobody over there had to get any permission from the same building board you're talking about. So that the power to say what goes on in terms of land use and even the sea and changing thing was taken from the board and given to the Prime Minister. And I don't think that has been reversed. You know, and so we go to the whole scenario. They bring in, and we are given the same platitude, they're going to get work. When they were doing the one over Christopher Harbour, the gentleman, I had to confront him on the radio. They were offering in the brochures private beaches. You know about that?
Well, they can offer anything that they want. I mean, anything they'll get away with.
On the national radio, these are people who we had passed our money to from the SIDF, offering people, investors to come in and think, and you can have your private beach. When the law says it can't happen, even now you find some of them putting in obstacles in people's way on the beach, so that they don't want the nationals to think, and sometimes our leaders conspire the word.
I don't know if we can take it that far, because those are some very, very broad statements. But I can tell you here, and that's why I don't want to go ahead and target any particular government. The thing is, this is a process that has been in the making for a long while.
Yeah, but you get it worse and worse.
That's the point. That's the point.
You get platitudes.
That's the point. But I'm going to tell you, as far as the legal position is concerned, when you're looking even at the Southeast Peninsula, people will become aggrieved about it, but you have to start by recognizing all that land on the Southeast Peninsula started as private lands. Okay? The fact that there are private lands does not mean you can do anything you want, because if it was so, they would have had to build their own road. The Kennedy Simmons High would not have gone over there. And as part of the overall planning process, the experience that I have had when I used to be involved in that kind of stuff as an engineer is that you think about all the capital that you're going to put in, and you have to think, no, you don't buy the land. You have to think in terms of capital recovery. How are you going to get back the money that you put in there? And the thing is that the road went in and it opened up all of these lands for development. And there's used something called a frontage charge, which you can use, where this road goes in, and whether they like it or not, there's a charge for all of these landowners who are actually benefiting from the road.
But do you know that some of them had the gall to ask the government to pay for putting the road on their land?
Well, that's another matter.
In some cases, to make verges.
No, but pause for a minute.
Okay, Mr. Ross. Mr. Ross.
Yeah,
let Sylvie make a point, and
my point is, look, our people and our leaders have got to take this land issue seriously, because soon you'll be pushed, our people will be pushed, when all you end up with a little handkerchief-sized piece of land that you can't do anything on, with the excuse that, you're bringing in these hotels and these hotels. Good, it is good, but our people must feel as if they own the land. That it is a feeling that we need to have. All right then.
Well, Sylvia, let me respond to you very quickly on something.
Before you go, Mr. Ross, let me take some calls. I'll give you an opportunity to respond to these calls, right?
Mm-hmm.
But let me take some more calls. Caller, you're live. Hello, caller?
Yes, good evening. Good evening, Mr. Liburd. Good evening, Mr. Ross.
Yes, good evening.
Okay. First, I don't want to really go in and break up your whole thing, but I am appealing to the people of the taxi and the hotels. They want the country to open up, but nobody wants to go and take the vaccination. And this country is not going to open up unless we meet a certain percentage of vaccination people. So I am appealing to them. Now, Mr. Ross, I coming to you first, right? You know, when I was a little boy, I used to be around you, your father, with Dunko, and we call Mr. England and son. And my main interest around you all, not was in the coffin, was in the boat. Because your father used to build boat all the time, and then he used them for a while, and then he sell them, and then he build another one, and so on. When I used to be going with your father on the boat, there was a man on top of the hill going over to the peninsula with a big Land Rover Jeep, and he's standing up on the Land Rover Jeep and a gun right next to him. And we had to drive all the way around Knoxhead and go around to go into where the hotel built around there now, right? What we used to call the Cockleshell Bay. And there was the honest people was Mr. Bowers and Miss another lady and Mr. Bowers. and they used to control around there. But there was no way you could go by land to get around there, right? So now what I am saying is that we talking about, you said to us, the general public here, we could go in the courthouse, not the courthouse, into the planning board and look up and see what was going on and then. But what is going on is the same people who government will put there to protect the poor people and protect the interests of St. Kitts and Nevis people, the Federation people. They was working for the government and still working for all of these big rich people. So there is no way you could have gone in there and ask no question and find out nothing. Because those are the ones who are working for both people. They're working for government for 2 and 6. And they're working for a pound with the rich people and them. So you had no access to it. And that is what killed the whole of the Federation like this. You own set of people. I am not want to call names and may call in the names. But they know what was going on and they know what they do. You understand me? I'm talking mostly on the surveyors them behalf, on the surveyors and them. They survey the land for the government and still survey the land for them people and give them rights to build and do anything they want to do. You know, so it's a good topic, but it's a serious topic. And continue our conversation. And Mr. Ross, God bless as usual. And Patches, good luck to you and your government and all the best. And continue to do the best what you could do in the UN for our country. God bless you, sir. Okay.
Thank you very much. We go straight back to the lines.
Yes. Good evening, Honorable Patches. I still waiting. I listen to Mr. Ross. But Mr. Ross, do you remember over West Farm when your father used to get the letter on them over there and somebody put barbed wire in the seawater and nobody could have gone? The same thing is over Frigate Bay. So I ask you all that who is in government to look upon the poor people, because poor people got to wash their skin at the bay. So you all look at it, and people now have the land and they can't get a title deed from in the courthouse. So you all look at that when you are not talking about land. People want the title deed from in the courthouse. And then the people then stop sitting in there and go into the business and not give people a title deed that they could go to the bank to get a loan. And you have a good evening, Mr. Ross.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. At 9:12, we go back to the lines. Caller, you live. Hello, caller.
Greetings in the name of our great African ancestors, especially the most honorable Marcus Messiah Garvey and Queen Enzing. A blessed evening, my beloved brothers. How you brothers doing? I've been a long time, brother Patches.
We got word now, boy. It's thanks to hear.
No, man. What happened, man? I had internet problem, man. I just get it fixed today, man. But they were just killing me, man, for almost a month, man. So, brother, everything is up and running. No, it's a great topic. But you see, brother Patches and brother Ross, I'm telling you, this nonsense got to stop, man. It got to stop. We cannot let other people come into our land and decide, beloved. And you see, brother, I got to blame the cabal that we had there from 1995 to 2015, brother, and the nonsense still continue 6 years. Beloved, this administration, I'm not blaming them for like 100%, but it's certain things they got to do. What are they afraid of? What they are afraid of? If an ordinary poor African man or woman do something, the law come down on them, fire and brimstone, thunder and lightning on them. But when the persons of a certain ilk, they They like to turn a blind eye, beloved. And that's not right, man. This is our land. This is our land that our ancestors shed blood, sweat, and tears and pay the ultimate prices. And nobody, let me repeat, nobody's supposed to come and decide, oh, you can't go down this beach. Utter nonsense. That ain't supposed to happen. And I call in this administration. Man, listen, you just give them 2 months. It done been too many 2 months. Beloved, just go and bulldoze, man, and let them take the people of St. Kitts and Nevis to court. Instead of people of St. Kitts and Nevis, take them to court. Come on. If I did build some kind of structure with their bay that is illegal, they will come and push it down. How come we got people coming, building all kind of structure and afraid? Administration after administration is afraid to deal with the situation. Come on, man. This nonsense must stop, beloved. Must stop, man. And I call Mr. Prime Minister, the Attorney General, my teacher Byron, and the entire cabinet take a stand, and people of St. Kitts Nevis demand that this administration take a stand and take a stand now, beloved. Beloved?
Okay.
Brother Ross and Brother Patches, I continue to listen. Great program. And Brother Patches, man, you're going to be here with me again, man. Brother Nabo is still here. Brother Nabo is 100% and fiery. Fire, more fire, brother. And it's going to be more fire, fiery, beloved, starting from now.
Gotcha.
But also continue to listen. Pan-Africanism our purpose. One love, beloved brothers.
One love, my brother. Now, Mr. Ross, I'm going to give you an opportunity. Let me take this call and I'll give you an opportunity after. Call you live.
Yeah, Patrick, good night.
Good night, sir.
Patrick, you hearing me?
Loud and clear, jam down.
Okay, my buddy. Nice to hear your voice, boy. Only you get the work done in Bastille. From since you left us, a lot of things ain't happening. Patrick, let me deal with the lady from Rock was trying to remember her name is Miss Smith, and Bowers is who had land around there. Miss Smith had banana there, and Bowers had cockleshell. Mr. Ross.
Yes.
Hello, sir.
Good night.
Good night.
You know, since we had change of government from Simmons' regime, he had a lot of lands in the southeast. And as Miss Henry said, that the government at the day just get rid of the board that was running the southeast. She's right. And not even that, you know, he do it right in Bastille in Port Zante, where he went and removed everything from down there in Port Zante, the sketch of Port Zante, and nobody know up to now where he put it. So, you gotta blame that guy, that vagabond boy Denzel. You have to blame him. You have to blame him. The question of culture with the man Bill over there by Anchorage, that was a travesty. It should have never happened. Should have never happened. Patches, before you left tonight, I want you to play the clip where the man was saying, oh, he's the best thing. Denville is the best thing. Denville is the best thing. But we want money, you know. We want Zamba money, you know. We want Zamba money. And I hope you guys it loud and clear. The Bindi want that money to feed the poor people. Patches, them land as you have said, over in the southeast peninsula, we have to pay attention over there. Because these people just come in and taking land just like that, you know. And they pay for the land. No, the hotel gets land, they get another portion, they tell the government to pay up some money, and they're paying up. They're not paying. And we got to make sure that the people's land come back to us. It's real land. And Brother Nabo said, we got to stand up. And the government got to stand up. Because it's real land. And it's a burning shame, man. We ain't got nothing, you know. We ain't have nothing. And we got to put the land. That's the only thing we can depend on, the land. Anyway, good and have a good night. But I want to hear the clip with the white man again.
Okay. I'm going to give you an opportunity to respond to some of the issues that were presented, Mr. Ross, QC Ross, right? Because really, since the land was fixed in supply, the system of private land ownership allow the wealthy few to enjoy exclusive rights to land and its benefits. In addition, I think Sylvine raised this, but I'm going to paraphrase it. In addition, increases in the land value resulted from publicly funded developments such as the roads and public transport systems unduly benefited landowners at the expense of the community. And she spoke to recovery. How do we recover on the capital expended by the government? Someone spoke to the conflict of interest in terms of our government workers. And I don't know if you want to touch some barbed wire on the beach in West Farm, right? But also, you made mention of going to the Development Control and Planning Board's office or the secretary, and you can take matters to court in relation to the Frigate Bay development or the Frigate Bay Beach encroachment on the seabed. But lawyers cost money. Would you work pro bono in ensuring that we can get justice for the people? So these are some of the issues that were raised.
Well, I work pro bono. At my age?
You will?
No. I was asking you. At my age,
yes.
I am not trying to build a law practice. I mean, I had my years of that. And the other thing is, short answer is that no, I will not take on a matter like that because it's going to take too much time and you need more than one man. For instance, if you look at what's happening in Grenada now, there is a group in Grenada that has constituted themselves to go and to have judicial review of quite a few of the approvals that have been granted. Okay? And they're trying to see if they couldn't get something started that can ripple through the region. But they have made a start. That there are about 15 or 20 people, and including some lawyers, a retired judge, and some others, and they're trying to make something happen. But I want to tell you, we cannot become so emotional that we forget that we are a people in a country of laws. Let me tell you one little capsule from one of the major cases I was dealing with, municipal authority, and so on. It stands for the proposition that the owner of land has a right to utilize his property in whatever manner he sees fit, subject only to the rights of surrounding owners. For instance, nuisance and so on, and those are old rights which can be looked after. But he goes on and says, however, that right to use the land as he sees fit may, not necessarily, it may be defeated or superseded by rezoning. Okay? So the thing is that when a government decides they're going to take on something like this, and it is a public interest activity, they can do it. But what has been established is that there are three prerequisites. Number one, you must have a clear intention that that's what you want to do. Number two, that you must proceed in good faith. And number three, you can't drag your feet. You must do it, they must be, they call it reasonable dispatch. Okay? Now, if it is that you're looking, like right now, I do not know that there are any zoning bylaws over on the Southeast Peninsula, or indeed any place on this great island. And maybe it's time that whether it is that the governments put together something similar to a think tank, where you get people who are involved in this kind of stuff in other places, who ain't looking for no work for themselves, can contribute to the process. For instance, let's take Calvin Beach. Calvin Beach is a guy from St. Kitts. As a matter of fact, as he's one of the oldest people that I can remember knowing from when I was a kid. He goes to Canada, and then there is he on the municipal board for the province of Ontario, dealing with all kinds of land issues. He understands the Planning Act. He understands the concept of zoning and so on. At least listen to some of these people. They don't have to follow them if they don't want to, but at least hear them, because something just might rub off. Okay? And then as far as the issues with if the Southeast Peninsula is going to become the big issue, and Patches, there's something I'm going to tell you that's very funny. I left here in 1961 to go to study engineering. A couple years before that, I recall one day taking James Claxton, who was an auctioneer, from the Treasury Pier, along with 2 or 3 people from the United States. They were going up to look because there was an opportunity for them to buy what was then called Salt Pond Estate, which is that whole big massive things, which includes what Christopher Harbour is on right now. My recollection is that the selling price, the asking price for that at that time was $35,000 US. Okay? Park that for a minute. Years later, I got involved in some other people in discussion about it, and some boys said, no, it was not $35,000 US, it was 35,000 pounds. I said, fine, I will take that, 35,000 pounds. Right now, you go on your check, and there's one owner over there who owns 2,140 acres, okay? Selling this land at $1 million an acre, which means this is $2,140 million. Okay? And what have they done for it? They used the land as a speculative commodity. Okay? In places that I've worked up north, there's some of these lands that you cannot buy. You can go in there on a long-term lease, you can do a joint venture, you can do all kinds of stuff, and what you get in return is the opportunity to make money, but the land remains in a communal use. Okay? And you're looking at these and you're saying to yourself, the so-called sale price of that land today far exceeds the budget of the entire country. And then it's occupying, as I said, about 10%, let me just look at the number. 10 or what? 13% of your accessible land. And it is just
Mr.
parked.
Ross,
Yes?
Mr. Ross.
Yeah.
Respectfully though, right? Don't you believe that when that road was being constructed, I think it was the 80s, sometime in the 80s, there was this talk of the road to nowhere. I'm sure you will remember that.
That is true.
And roads and infrastructure was put in, right? But don't you believe then is this what they call the unearned gains from the landowners over there that encourages speculation in the land?
Yes, as a matter of fact, but that will happen just about all the time. For instance, if you look at Ontario, there's a lot of big swaths of land here that were picked up years ago for next to nothing, not next to nothing, quite cheaply. But as the the municipal borders move, and they normally move north and west, taking in a lot of these lands, and some of these here, we had some guys who were some poor farmers who had 100 acres here, 200 acres there. Right now, they are very, very, very valuable lands. But the point is that you do not want to interfere with these people and their capacity to make money if that is the way it is heading. But you do not, but for your broader society to go ahead and take and invest strongly and put out all kinds of money for infrastructure and so on, I guess it has been done. But
how do you recover?
Well, I will tell you what used to happen when I was in engineering. For instance, let us suppose that there is a need to go ahead and put in a water supply system for some place. You know what's the capital cost of the plant. You know how much the pumping stations are going to cost. You know what is the value of the pipe and so on. You put that in and you charge a frontage charge. It's almost like on a user pay basis. So the capital expenditure, you go ahead and you're going to recover it maybe over 30 years, maybe even over 50 years. So that the burden does not come down on the land user at once, and you tack it on so that when he's paying his land tax bill, there's another line item about these water improvements. It's the same thing like if you go down, you're buying an airline ticket. Anyway, there's a little environmental charge there, and this is something that will accumulate over time. So the same way you go to a bank and you borrow money and you build your house and you pay for it over time, the same way when the municipality comes and they give you this water system, A, you're going to pay for the water because it's metered, and B, you're going to have to somehow pay for the recovery of all of the outlay. So the thing is, it is not new. It is just that people want to sit down and perhaps sit with some people who have done some of this and just exchange some ideas, and you might find out that you might find something that's helpful. And by the way, Patches, with respect to that road to nowhere, do you know that within the documents in favor of those guys over at Christopher Harbour, they got the permission to take up that road if they want to? Swallow that.
Okay, let's go back to the lines. Carlo, thank you for holding. You're live. Hello, Carlo. Okay, so I want you to expand on that though, Mr. Ross. That cheeky comment. They have the authority to take up the road, you said.
A contractual right. As a matter of fact, my view is that I think that, with a proper fight, it might be able to be defeated. But it's written into one of their contracts that they've got the right to remove the road, which would mean that there is no way that you can go down and take the sea bridge anymore, because you ain't going to be able to go down that way.
Before you go back to... let's take this call then. Let's take this call. Caller, you're live.
The caller's gone.
These callers. See, are you there, caller?
Yeah, hello.
Caller, you're live.
Yeah. So, Mr. Ross, my question: who gave the permission that orders that they could go down there and take up the road? Who do that? Hey, Mr. Ross, so what happened now? You know what that means to tell us? You don't have no land over here, you don't have no right over here. And I saying this, Mr. Ross, whosoever do that, they need to be treated like how those wicked leaders up in Africa are being treated by the people them.
Well, wait, pause for a minute. I mean, let's not single out Africa, because if I go back far enough, is Africa I'm going to be also.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
I've been to a lot of other countries in Africa. Don't down them, because I got better treatment in some of those places than I got in North America.
All right, okay. Yeah, thanks for your answer.
Mr. Ross, just for clarity, it is a contractual agreement between the government of St. Kitts and Nevis and the investors over there.
That is correct. That is correct.
Let's go back to the lines. Call your line.
Yeah, man. Good evening, man. How are you?
I am peaceful. Yourself?
Yeah, pretty good, man. Yeah, this topic about land
land ownership is very, touching, man. It's very touching to see how the lands in St. Kitts and Nevis is just disappearing to foreigners. I blame the government for that, man. A lot of foreigners are coming in, they buy up the land in, some large quantities. The government is not doing a good job of preserving the ownership of the land for the locals. And there's going to be some problems in the near future with that type of situation in both islands. I came from an area in Cotton Ground where there's a big estate up in the mountain above Barnesgate. They sold out the estate in Tower Hill. And the people in Barnesgate, they cannot even own a basketball court. That's a shame. On the St. Kitts end, a lot of people in both St. Kitts and Nevis, they get the opportunity. A lot of lands goes up for sale, and they have a lot of locals that just sitting on their money. And then when the foreigners come in and buy up these lands, they start talking shit. Excuse my language, man. But the government got to do a better job of preserving some of those lands for the local people. They need to adopt Robert Mugabe's style. Foreigners and these rich people, they should be limited to the amount of lands that they could buy or own, and a lot of the land should be leased to these people. On the St. Kitts end, when everybody in St. Kitts thinking that the peninsula is a place where they don't want to live, now, right before their eyes, they're seeing the foreigners, them coming in and just owning the place now. So the people is to blame too, man. They need to be more proactive and be proactive about their own island, and don't watch things happen and wait until it's too late to react. The ownership of the land is very critical to the people because those two islands is too small, man. That peninsula area in St. Kitts, that's one of the most exquisite land in both islands. Why local people don't even want to live over there? How come some locals can't be owners of lands in that area of St. Kitts? These are the hard questions that the government needs to be asked. Those lands, they're going to be so expensive that nobody will be able to buy not even a house spot over there. And as far as we not having access to the beach and that type of stuff got to be done away with, man. If the government don't get a check and get this stuff organized, there's going to be problems in the future. But that's my contribution, man. I wish you guys the best of luck.
Thanks for your contribution. Very sound intervention. We go back to the lines. Call your line.
Yeah, good night, Mr. Liburd, and good night to you, Dr. Pat, QC, and good night to the listening audience right across the planet. I want to ask Dr. Ross the question. Dr. Ross, you are just an attorney, a solicitor, and you, as someone who have represented people in that category of people, do you think that attorneys and solicitors here in St. Kitts do help to contribute in representing the companies and investors here who come in undermining and depriving citizens of their rights and access to beaches and other stuff to deprive citizens of their rights? Because actually you have the investor and you have somebody who's going to represent them here in St. Nevis. So you're either going to do what I told you, or you're going to have to do what I want. So I just wanted to make us to understand in terms of you represent these people and help us to understand who made the decision in terms of whether the investor or the people who represented them. And two, do you think with the period of time from 2006 to 2007, this government here really needs to revisit the future of our deal based on the slow progress and the length of time it is taken to be implemented? Have a good night and nice hearing from you, Dr. Ross.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We go straight back to the lines. Call your line.
Good night to the Ambassador Ian Patches Liburd. Good night.
Good night,
and
Father Politics.
And good night, Mr. Ross.
Good night, sir.
Yeah, Mr. Ross, I born in the 60s. And I know that from Mr. Butcher government, for when they used to plant cotton, and you remember they used to come as a little baby, come in the cotton field and put me down. You understand? And from cotton to sugar cane, after that sugar cane too. I remember when I was a little boy, maybe about 10 years, I going with a hoe. Go help me mother weed cane. We got to go all the morning and go help weed. Because they also got, you know, they take a field for them. They got the work. And they got a thing. So if the morning only, we going to help weed cane and I go spread trash. And saying all of this, right? That I come up in the sugar industry. When I started from school, I went to go to construction. My father sent me to go to construction, maybe about 14, 15 years. Because my mother had 14 of us. And we know how each and every one family think in this federation of St. Kitts and Nevis work in the sugar industry. And when the farmer leader put up our land for debt swap in the bank, that was a disgrace, I believe, for the whole federation of St. Kitts and Nevis in Woodham Olivia. You understand? And some people applaud it and was something good because it was politics. But people like me and others hope to know can give me 5 acres of land to raise some animal plant, or to plant some sweet potato or something in your area where you live. Our land here down here in the West Warm, Stonesport and area going to Buckley here because of politics. Here, let out to all kind of people overseas and all. And tell me if it is right to any leader for 20 years and could not find another solution after he had a successful SIDF fund, they helping the country, that he could have come and just put our land in the bank just like that. How will the poor ordinary man, the poor parents that gone, our grandchildren and children to come, could have bought piece of land from the bank? I want you to tell me that. And that was any good leadership for any leader for 20 years, a government for 20 years. Okay then, Patrick and Mr. Ross, may God bless you.
Good night.
Thanks a lot for your input. We go straight back to the lines. Call your line.
Yes, good evening, Honorable Patrick. Me again. The land them over Frigate Bay was belonged to the Wrigley, the Boone, and the Wilkins. But in our area in Boys, no, we don't vote. The Prime Minister, he probably get land over here. And we vote over here, we think we land over here. So nobody from no area is supposed to get our land. And you take care. I still waiting, and you're married. I ain't care what nobody says to you. Let's go. Okay.
Thank you very much. We go straight back to the lines. Caller,
yeah, good evening again. Now, Mr. Ross.
Good evening.
How can the government handle this land speculation on government land? I know it is harder on private. By that I mean we have investors coming who say they have a project. They require so much land and it is given or sold to them. And not long after, they disassemble the whole project and the land is in their possession and they speculate on it. And some of them manage to get more than 1 set, 2 set, 3 set. So how can the government, because I recall when I was at UE, we did this thing about land speculation, where investors come in, buy up whole blocks, and leave it sometime on the grass, when the people around could do the land. Now you have down in the west, that racetrack, you have Kitchen Hill take up the whole mountain. You know, how do we, then you have the other one down by Sandy Point. How can the government deal with land speculation? That's the question.
Okay, thank you very much. We want to go back. Have you respond to those questions? Start with the last one, Tony, and also the issue of the land debt swap, and how can whether the lawyers contribute to the undermining of some of these the position of governments as it comes to some of these deals. Should we revisit the Christopher Harbour deal and the question of how can government preserve lands for locals, whether they should do it through leases or what have you? Do you want to address those before we go back to the lines?
Well, okay, fine. The first one is about lawyers. Remember, lawyers work for clients, but on matters. If somebody is of terrible reputation and they wind up in a hospital, the doctor will look after them to the same way that he'd look after somebody of high moral character. His job is to look after. So I don't think you can blame it on the lawyers. Okay, because the lawyers are not creating the situation. They are servicing the people. So if some developer was to come to me, I can tell you, I know that there are certain cases that I had opportunity to take and I didn't, but that's for personal reasons. But that does not mean that the individual is not entitled to a lawyer. Okay? So I don't know that you can blame the lawyer. What you back off and say, okay, fine, is the lawyer working within the law? And if you say yes and you have a problem with it, you back off further and say, how can the law be changed so that when the lawyer is working for his client, the end result is more palatable? So that's the one about the lawyers, and that's the broadest brush. Now, as far as speculation is concerned, because we only have 68 square miles, my view is that a good planning process could be put in place where any major development that's coming in, you go ahead and determine what are going to be the impacts on the people, on the country, on the state. Okay? And you have to do an impacts benefit analysis, and it has to make sense to you. For instance, with the benefit of hindsight, now, you take all of the people who are involved in this thing with Christopher Harbour, and it is not just that. Take any major development, bring the people around and say, okay, fine, would you do today what you did way back when? Very likely most people will say no. And then say, okay, fine, why would you do something different now? Because I learned. And say, okay, fine, did you have an opportunity to learn way back then? The answer is probably yes, but they didn't go looking for the answers. So what I'm saying here is, for instance, just go ahead and Google Switzerland and their land use policy. I know for sure that for you to be a landowner in Switzerland, you've got to be a resident there. And it is very unlikely that you're going to wind up owning 3 pieces of land. I think there's some provision around 2, but I don't have that hard answer because I didn't research that recently. But I know that there are lots of places which have land use management policies, and a land use management policy can be imposed. As I said here, the person has this right to use the land the way he sees fit. However, that right may be defeated or superseded by zoning. Okay? If 3 prerequisites are established, it has to be a clear intention, you're going to proceed in good faith, and you're going to proceed with reasonable dispatch. So, and the other thing is, as far as the agreements are concerned with people who come and they get all of these concessions against specific promises and they don't deliver, what you've got is a breach situation, and there's got to be recourse. So that's my few cents on those 2 patches.
What about the preservation of lands for locals?
Well, as a matter of fact, you can. Anything can go in a land use policy. You know, and the planning is a people process. You know, just let me show you. Let me give you an idea of something. Within the last year or two, I understand that there was a situation where a guy flies into St. Kitts on a private jet. He brings over 300 marijuana plants. He has a pilot, and it lands here. And I, for the life of me, cannot understand why the pilot was not arrested. He's in charge of that plane. The owner might be on the plane, but when that plane is in the air and landing, the pilot is in charge. And if he knows that he's traveling with, because, read here, that was contraband. Okay? And as a matter of fact, you go down into St. Lucia, and you go around Castries, and there's a boatyard over there. All of those are confiscated. You know why? Because they were involved in contraband. Okay, so that's on the one side. The other side of it, let us get past, let us suppose it wasn't contraband. What was the idea was coming? Coming in here, and number one, we're going to want a lot of land. We're going to want to put your people on the land to grow certain things for us. And they're going to grow it and they're going to give it to us. And then we are going to go ahead and make it, do whatever we have to do for the end user. So what are these people going to be doing? They're taking you back to the days when you were sharecroppers. Okay? And it doesn't have to happen. And this is not about me, but I got to tell you, I was representing a group in Ontario, and they, it was a band of, it was a First Nation. On their reserve, or within close to their reserve, a lot of diamonds were discovered. So one of these big international companies come and they want to go ahead and sign up, and we're going to start doing diamond mining. So these guys contacted me. I go to this meeting. I said, okay, fine. What you guys want to do? They said, oh, we're going to work this mine. I said, how long do you think it's going to take before it's all worked out? 75 years, maybe more. And they said, after that, what do you do? Well, we move on and get another mine. I said, that's my problem. I thought that you'd say you just move on. What about, aren't you going to clean up the mess that you leave behind? Huh? You know, what? And then what about the people who are in this area? He said, well, if they got any trucks, we can get them to work. I said, that is true. And then what happened after 5 years? Are you going to still looking for them for truckers? What about a training program? So that after 5 years, you've got some of them in management, even at lower levels. And after perhaps 10 years, you've got a lot of them in middle or upper management positions. You see, and all of these things can go into whatever you're doing. Okay? I mean, you look at that thing, I've got enough experience in those kind of things to tell you things can be made to happen. But it must start really with what you've got. And there's no point slamming any government past. Don't do that. Start and look at it and say, here is where we are and how do we go forward positively. That's the challenge.
Okay, and we're not slamming any government on this program, but one of the things you addressed earlier in terms of the what I call was the amount of land, the situation, or the situation factor. I think that was the term I used in terms of the amount of land. And I believe you said there were about 20,000 acres, or 20,264 acres to be exact, if I think I got you right.
Yeah.
In relation, in respect of use for housing, agriculture, and hotel parks and so on. But without slamming anyone, this we haven't addressed that for the night. But I want you to chew on this. Then I'll go back to the lines and take our final set of callers, and I'll come back and respond. But I want you to chew on this one in the meanwhile, Mr. Ross.
Let us look at what we're doing, for example, with our sugar lands. In this country, in the past, these lands were owned by just about 5 families. St. Kitts and Nevis was one big sugar estate. In fact, we have 68 square miles. We have 68 sugar estates here in this country. My government, proud of its record in the past, in the 70s, 75 in particular, nationalized the entire sugar industry. And so the lands were taken in the name of the people. Of course, they were paid. The planters who owned it, they were paid. Mr. Bradshaw, our first national hero, the Right Excellent Sir Robert Llewellyn Bradshaw, he did that act. It is now my time to distribute those lands.
Yes, Mr. Ross. Yes, did it in the name of the people. Yet, but as we speak, our people are still houseless and our people are still landless. But I want you to chew on that for a moment. I'll go back to the lines and take my final set of calls. Caller, thank you for holding your line.
You hear the man that will say, it is my time now to distribute the land, when he really distribute the land. But who he distributed to? All the man, Alki David, who come in here and had the press conference in his presence and both big bad word causing the now Prime Minister, Mr. Harris, all because he want to come in here, he don't break the law, come in with the marijuana plant them, and want to get our land free, and our black Rasta fellows and local fellows must go work on his land, go plant the marijuana, and then he take it and go make a load of money. All the kind of foolishness that man they do to this country, and those in authority who are supposed to uphold the law, what they were doing, What they were doing, the man ain't supposed to come in here with a plain law, how we come in here. So I'm glad you touched that. And all of them kind of liars who now cussing this government because they don't get the big bottleneck red tape to put in the bread. They're cussing the Prime Minister and talking about transparency and all kind of thing. Lawyer button up and all of them there. Mr. Ross, thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you, sir.
Let's go back to the lines. Caller, you're live. Okay, we missed that call. This email reads, Dr. Liburd, the gentleman is correct. You need to draw up a plan for a highway around St. Kitts. St. Kitts traffic is growing. That means it will come a time when the St. Kitts Island main road going through those villages with those narrow roads have to shift to a highway. Reads that email. Mr. Liburd, St. Kitts need to use the sugar lands and clear an area around the island to build a highway in times to come. Now that the space of land is there, you may not have the money to build the highway, but you can clear the area that no building or construction can go in the way. St. Thomas and St. Martin never did this. That's why they have it hard to build a highway that is very much needed. Thank you. We go back to the lines. A caller, you are live. Hello, caller. Okay, Mr. Ross, can you respond to the issue, and that this probably will bring us into the area as well that refer to inaccessible lands, and perhaps if we look at how we can access those lands, whether by opening interiors and so on. But what's your response?
Well, very quickly, Patches, you have to recognize that 20,264 is not free land to be used up, That includes all that is used, all the current uses.
Already?
Okay? So so what I think this thing needs is an inventory. Okay? It is not difficulty with all of these good global positioning systems and so on to get the surveillance to get a proper get proper mapping of the lands on St. Kitts. Okay? And you can see which sections are currently occupied, because of that 20,000 acres, I do not know I do not know what percentage of it is open and available. But then you get down, and when you find that, then you can develop some kind of policy where people can acquire land for housing and for different purposes. And even if it is that you want to say, we will go ahead and give you your deeds for housing purposes when it comes to other aspects of the land that belong to government, that you might want to get involved in lease arrangements. The other day, I think last week or the week before, I was hearing something on the radio, and it was about somebody in Nevis who was claiming that they had squatters' rights for some piece of land that they were farming. And I just could not believe what I was hearing. I mean, you just don't go ahead and get squatters' rights just like that. They are, and this is not a law class, so I'm not going to go through the details. But what I'm saying is that these people were just claiming like that, they knew they were wrong. Coming back to you, Patches, as far as this is concerned, we need an inventory. We need to know what is there before we start determining what we can do with it. And as far as that tape that you played about somebody saying that their government did this in 1975. No. That was the Bradshaw government that did that in 75. Okay? And it was between 1980 and 1995 that the succeeding government found the money to pay for those lands. And then after that is when you find that these lands are being drained off back to where they were before Bradshaw made his move. So just put things in proper perspective and keep the truth. Put your spin on it if you want to, but start with truth. And as far as the houseless and so on is concerned, these are policy decisions that can be taken that should be able to alleviate all of these stressful areas, and conversations like this should not continue.
Okay, I think we are out of time, certainly, and the Mayor of St. Paul's is standing by, so you do not move your dial until your clerk comes in hereafter. But in your wrap, Mr. Ross, I want you to consider the land use planning function, right? And look at it as an integral part of the national development process, because it cannot surely be viewed in isolation from the other critical elements of that process, and of course, namely social and economic planning. And I also want you in your wrap to just tell us in summary what are some of the land use considerations that ought to be taken on board in development and control.
When you say development and control, I trust that you're not speaking about the current board.
In development control.
Oh yes, okay. Well, the first thing is you have to sensitize the people so that they want to become involved. You have to have some community meetings. You've got to get the people out to get some understanding of what they want, and you must be able to show them what their options are. And it is not a matter of a dream. You have to show them what is attainable. Okay? And you start by defining where you are and what your current circumstances are. And when you've got that defined, you move it aside, because romancing the problem does not make it get a solution. You then turn and say, okay, fine, against the issues that we have, what do we want to do? And there you're free. Put down everything, and then you start looking at them to see what really is attainable. And then when you narrow it down to what is attainable, then you got to go look at two things. You're going to have to look at what is the time frame and what is the cost. So it is a matter of process, and these processes have been worked in many areas, and not just in North America, okay? Not just in quote-unquote Europe. There are a lot of other places that you can go to see what has been done. But my view is that you've got to start by identifying the problem before you start defining the solution. So it is a matter of a people process, and there's got to be a political will to start. And if you start, then my view, and recognize that it is not just a one-shot deal. it's going to be a process that you're going to continue, because many people might not want to be getting involved in the first instance, but after a while it could take root if it is that it makes sense to people, and you just move from there.
Okay, well, I believe we perhaps will have to come back at some time to continue this conversation, because we haven't even dealt with the conflict between agriculture and development, and the incompatible uses of even our residential areas.
But Patches, stop.
As other proliferation of other things. But your final word, Mr.
My final word is, Patches, some time ago you were on another program and I heard you speaking about the fallacy of single-purpose planning. So when you speak about this come between agriculture and this, why can't you have both? Go back and read that document you had, Patches, the fallacy of single-purpose planning.
No. I'm saying we'll have to address the conflict. How do we deal with it? No?
Yes.
Because the residential areas, for example, are residential development onto agricultural land. We can perhaps look back at empirical data, whereby most of the arable, fertile arable flatlands in St. Kitts were taken out, and the sugar cane were on the slopes. And even when the government brought in these harvesters could work on the slopes. And these are some of the issues that can be addressed.
And they could be addressed around the table.
Your final word.
Well, engineers usually find ways to solve all problems. Engineering is problem solving. Give it to us and we can do it.
Yes, we look forward. Okay, so we look forward to that solution or those solutions in due course. I want to thank you, Mr. Ross, and for those of you who may have joined late, if you were not aware of the individual you saw on your screen or the voice you heard, we were speaking to Mr. Esmond Anthony Ross QC, professional engineer and a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Arbitration, also a trained solicitor and former judge. And I want to thank him on your behalf, and in the process I want to thank Almighty God for guiding our conversation tonight. And as always, I want to thank you, the many callers. I know we didn't entertain as many as we should have tonight because of the guests we had, and some people get in 3 times, I don't know, and some people can't get in. I apologize for that, I should say, but I want to thank all the callers nonetheless. I want to thank the emailers. I want to thank those on social media, on Facebook and YouTube and other social media. And I want to let you know, remind you, that you are the ones who make Straight Talk, and for that I say a big thank you. I have to thank our producers as well, John James in the back room, and Theo Clark, who is there in the studio. They all make this possible. Don't forget Bevan Wilkerson, my dear brother, as well. And without them, there's no Straight Talk. But until we connect on Monday for another edition of Straight Talk, be good to yourselves and to all whom you meet. Have yourselves a wonderful weekend. And stay safe, stay healthy. Remember, whatever your mind conceive, that you will achieve. But first of all, you must believe. So when you wake in the morning, thank God for the morning light. Thank you for taking you through the night. And my Straight Talk family, keep moving on. Bye-bye until we connect again.